I'm not ashamed.
What death did Pharaoh ask Moses to have God remove? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Exodus on Walking Through the Bible.
Worth the glory of his cross.
If you have a Bible with you, you can turn to Exodus chapter 10. We're going to be reading from verses 12 to 20. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So Exodus chapter 10, beginning at verse 12. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the land of Egypt for the locusts, that they may come upon the land of Egypt and eat every herb of the land, all that the hail is left." So Moses stretched out his hand over the land of Egypt, and the Lord brought an east wind on the land all that day and all that night. When it was morning, the east wind brought the locusts, and the locusts went up over all the land of Egypt and rested on all the territory of Egypt. They were very severe. Previously there had been no such locusts as they, nor shall there be such after them. For they covered the face of the whole earth, so that the land was darkened. And they ate every herb of the land, and ate all the fruit of the trees which the hail had left. So there remained nothing green on the trees or on the plants of the field throughout all the land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron in haste and said, "I have sinned against the Lord your God and against you. Now therefore please forgive my sin only this once, and entreat the Lord your God that he may take away from me this death only." So he went out from Pharaoh and entreated the Lord. And the Lord turned a very strong west wind, which took the locusts away and blew them into the Red Sea. There remained not one locust in all the territory of Egypt. But the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he did not let the children of Israel go. In this episode, we conclude our look at the 8th plague God inflicted upon Egypt as a result of Pharaoh's refusal to let the children of Israel go, the plague of locusts. We thus far have seen 7 plagues: the plague of the water of the Nile turning to blood, the plague of an overabundance of frogs brought out of the Nile, the plague of lice or ticks, the plague of flies, the plague of pestilence or disease causing death of all the cattle in the field, the plague of boils, skin ulcers that turned into running sores, and the plague of hail. Pharaoh was given a chance after each of these plagues to obey the word of the Lord, but after each time he refused, and so God continued plaguing Egypt. In our last episode, we had Pharaoh's servants begging Pharaoh to let the children of Israel go in order to avoid the locusts. Pharaoh initially agreed to let them go, and all of them go, to worship God. But he expected their return. Upon further thought, he changed his mind, only allowing the men to go and worship, thus ensuring that they would return. The Lord was not going to accept Pharaoh's half obedience, which in fact is full disobedience. God commanded Moses to stretch out his hand over the land of Egypt to call upon the locusts. They may eat all that was left behind by the hail. Moses did as he was commanded, and the Lord brought an east wind on the land all that day and all that night. In the morning, the east wind brought the locusts. God could have immediately brought the locusts forth, but he chose to do it this way. Moses could not have predicted that the wind would come, for he had no weather radar. So when the wind came at Moses' command, this had to be from the Lord. And when the locusts came with the wind the next day, that too had to be from the Lord. The amount of locusts that arrived were just as God had said. No swarm of locusts had come to Egypt like that before, and none would come after. So great was their numbers that the land was darkened. They ate everything that was left, including all the fruit of the trees. Pharaoh's disobedience left Egypt without food. After the hail, God was merciful and left them some food. After Moses telling them what God would do, Pharaoh's servants begged that he obey. Yet because of Pharaoh's stubbornness and hard heart, Pharaoh tested God and lost. Seeing the destruction, Pharaoh came before Moses and said that he had sinned against Jehovah and against him. He asked for forgiveness for this sin, which he asked after the plague of the hail as well. He pleaded that Moses would have the Lord remove this death from him. What was he asking? He was asking that the locusts be removed and that he and the people be spared from the death that they produced. The locusts had been sent as punishment for Pharaoh's sin, and Pharaoh, seeing that, desired that not only his sin be forgiven, but the punishment for that sin be removed as well. Although it is not wrong to pray that God be merciful in his punishment for sin, we should be much more concerned that we be forgiven of our actual sin, willing to accept any punishment that God brings upon us because of our sin. Pharaoh only recognized his sin after he was punished and wanted everything about it to be removed. God in this case was merciful, for he caused a very strong west wind to come upon Egypt. a wind from the opposite direction which brought the locusts, which took the locusts away and blew them into the Red Sea. Note that God didn't destroy these locusts, but he did confine them to the Red Sea. God has full control of this planet, and as Acts 17:26 reminds us, he sets the bounds of our habitations. These locusts would eventually die out, but they would do so over the Red Sea, where they would do no further damage. After seeing the locusts removed, Pharaoh again hardened his heart, showing us that his repentance was not genuine. His words were simply for show in order to have the locusts removed. God was not fooled, though. He knew that that is what Pharaoh would do, so he will bring yet another plague upon Egypt because of Pharaoh's disobedience. With that, our time is up for today. Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's question and answer edition, seeking to answer the question, will people meet their families in heaven? The Lord willing, on Monday, we will return to our study of Exodus, covering Exodus chapter 10, verses 21 to 29, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time.
I'm not ashamed.
Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.
Of his cross.